I've been a cleaner at a public school for 15 years now. I've cleaned thousands of classrooms, and I've worked at several schools around the state. When I was 27, I purchased a home across the state. This meant I would need to be transferred to work at a new high school. I won't say which one for privacy reasons. It was a very old and small school. I believe it had opened up in the early 1920s. Work started out as usual. I was very confident as a school cleaner, as I'd been doing it for many years. But a few weeks into working at this new school, I started to notice some strange things happening. Since this high school was very small, I would often be one of the only cleaners working at a time. And it would usually take me only a couple of hours to get everything done. There was, however, one classroom in particular that creeped me out. It was closed for reasons which were not disclosed to me at the time, so I would only be sent to clean up the dust there once every month. The first time I entered the room to clean it, I noticed some unusual writing on the chalkboard. There wasn't any chalk located in the classroom, so I figured it had been an older drawing. The writing didn't appear to be in English. It mostly looked like scribbles. I didn't think much of it at the time, and chopped it up to some kids messing around with it when the classroom was still in use. I simply mopped the floors and left, leaving the chalkboard as it was. However, next month, when I was sent to clean the room a second time, I noticed that the writing had changed. It was still incoherent scribbles that made no sense, but it was much different now from how it looked the first time. I was always given keys to unlock the room on the day I had to clean it, as it was kept locked up, so as far as I knew, nobody should be entering that room besides me. I asked around the next day to figure out if anyone had entered that room, but no one could really give me a straight answer. I was told that no one had any reason to go in there, let alone scribble on the chalkboard. This continued for a few months. Every time I would enter that classroom, the scribbles on the chalkboard would be different. And every time I would look around, I wouldn't see any chalk at all. I was going about my business as usual when it was time to clean the closed-down classroom. I entered and noticed that the scribbles written on the chalkboard were different, as usual. That's when I got the stupid idea to erase the chalkboard. I went into another classroom to grab something to wipe the chalkboard with and began cleaning it up. Just as I finished, I heard a door slam very loudly. It was the door to the classroom. I was sure I had pissed off whatever was making these drawings. I ran to the door of the classroom and swung it open, then booked it down the hallway and out of the school. I knew not to stick around there any longer than I needed to. I called my supervisor and told them that I left early because I wasn't feeling well, so someone else was called in to take over. I still had the keys to the classroom with me, so the next day I walked by the classroom and took a peek inside, curious to see if anything new had been written. When I looked at the chalkboard, I was horrified as I read the word "die" written on the chalkboard. The first coherent word written on that chalkboard since I began working there. I transferred to work at a different school soon after that, and things continued as normal from then on, but I was never able to learn why exactly that classroom wasn't being used. This story is quite old, but I remember it as though it happened yesterday. I believe I was in my 3rd year of high school. I also had a job as a hostess at a local restaurant, so I didn't have much free time outside of work and studies. My biology teacher, who I'll call Mr. Hughes, was about to have a baby with his wife. Because of this, he had to take quite a few days off. While he was away, our school brought in a supply teacher to replace Mr. Hughes. This supply teacher was a middle-aged man who was very quiet. I'll call him Mr. Ness. He was a very hands-off teacher who would basically give us the work material and have us study independently. He would usually only exchange a few words with us students. I didn't really mind this, as he was only a temporary replacement. Plus, I tend to work better alone anyways. However, I started to get creeped out by him when I would notice him staring at me during class. It wasn't just a casual glance either. He would creepily stare at me constantly while the class was studying. Even if I caught him staring, he would hold his gaze and stare directly into my eyes. My friends even started to notice too, and we all thought he was super creepy. I remember asking my other teachers if they knew anything about him, but none of them really knew the guy, as he wasn't the type of person to stick around work and make conversation. He would even leave the school during lunch so no one would make small talk with him. Since it would only be a few more days until Mr. Hughes came back as our teacher, I decided to brush it off. When he would stare at me, I pretended not to notice. It made it difficult to focus during class, but as long as he didn't take it further than staring, I was willing to put up with it. Finally, the weekend came, and Mr. Hughes was scheduled to return to class on Monday. It was the last day I would be seeing creepy Mr. Ness, so I was relieved. We all left school for the weekend, and I took the city bus directly to my hostess job. It went by fast, and my shift finished at 7 p.m. that day. The city bus was scheduled to arrive at 7:15, so I stood by the bus stop and waited. While I was waiting, a man approached me. He didn't say anything, he just stood beside me, so I assumed he was also waiting for the bus. We stood there silently. It was pretty awkward, but I was glad he wasn't trying to make any small talk. The bus arrived, we both got on, and I found a seat near the back of the bus. After a few minutes, I looked up and noticed that the man was staring at me. It was only then that I realized it was Mr. Ness. He was following me, or was it just a weird coincidence? I was definitely on high alert at this point, but I wasn't really sure how to go about the situation. This was before cell phones, so I couldn't really call anyone to meet me at my stop. I decided to wait and see if he would follow me. Maybe I was just overthinking it. When my stop arrived, I stood up and walked quickly off the bus. As suspected, Mr. Ness also got off the bus soon after me. As soon as he exited the bus behind me, I booked it running. I ran the opposite direction of my home so he wouldn't know where I lived. I don't even know how long I ran before I realized he wasn't following anymore. Eventually, I made it home and told my mom everything. She informed the school the next day and they began an internal investigation. Turns out, he had a pretty spotty history and the school hadn't conducted a background check on him before hiring him. He was fired as a substitute teacher, but I don't think he faced any further consequences. I'm not sure what he planned to do to me, but I'm just glad I was able to outrun him. I started high school a couple of months ago, but I'm thinking about switching schools already because of some recent events. All of my friends and classmates from elementary school went to different high schools than me, mostly because my parents wanted me to attend a high school that was walking distance from our house. This meant that I didn't really know anyone in any of my classes, only a few acquaintances. Even though I'm pretty introverted, I was eager to make some new friends. When walking to and from school every morning and evening, I kept running into another kid from my class. For privacy reasons, I won't be sharing his real name. Let's call him Aiden. He was also a quiet kid, but we kept on making small talk on our walks to and from school. Turns out, he lived just down the street from me, and we actually had a lot in common. This became a regular thing. Every day, me and Aiden would walk to and from school together. He became the first friend that I made in high school. I wish I could say that lasted, but this dude is really starting to get creepy. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had to take 2 days off of school for an out-of-town event my parents dragged me to. We all got back on a Tuesday night at roughly 6 p.m., I think. When we got in the house, we saw Aiden sitting in our living room, watching TV. My parents were obviously stunned. They asked him what he was doing there. He said that he was waiting for me to get back. My parents locked the doors before leaving, but he was able to break the lock in the back door to get inside. Aiden had never been in my house before. I don't know what made him think that it was okay for him to enter my home while I was away. My parents angrily sent him home and contacted his parents about it. His dad agreed to pay us back for the broken lock, and they forbid him from seeing me anymore. But seeing him at school was still very awkward. I'm considering switching schools, but I'm scared that my absence in class will only provoke him to come visit me again. I'm not really sure what to do, so I'll update again if anything escalates further. For now, my parents have been driving me to and from school, so I don't run into him on the way.